Hi everyone, I'm TMurphy and I'm a social worker in the Adoption and Permanent Service in Newry in the Southern Trust, and I completed the Systemic Practice course to intermediate level last year. So I work predominantly in the area of post-adoption support, and all the children that are placed for adoption have experienced significant trauma and loss, and we would see many of these children going on to have enduring psychological and behavioural issues across their lifespans. So, for example, many of our families experience child-to-parent aggression and violence, which is a particularly challenging part of our job to support families who are experiencing this really complex problem. So before I started the course, I would have felt increasingly, I suppose, at a loss as to how best to support these multi-stress families. And very often I would have focused on the parenting as being the cause of the problems. And quite often parents would have disengaged from me, and I would have experienced them as being resistant or difficult and just felt stuck. So early on in foundation year, I started to hear concepts like taking a non-expert approach, working collaboratively with service users, walking alongside them, and viewing clients as experts in their own lives. And this really made me think about the parents who had disengaged from me previously, that maybe they felt I had been viewing them as a problem. And this was a real turning point for me. I really connected with these concepts, and I decided at that point, that I wanted to work more collaboratively. So I was hooked in after that. So on my next slide, I would like to highlight some of the benefits that working systemically has brought to my practice. I have found that it really embraces the complexity of relationships in adoption. And holding multiple perspectives reduces the tendency to blame. At the end of the day, it's unrealistic to expect one clean, simple explanation. And if we accept the complicated nature of life, it places us in a good position to understand and solve problems. I think it is fair to say that we are complex beings and live in a messy world. Next slide, Suzanne. So to explain what I mean by multiple perspectives, let me give you a recent example of a family I've been working with. So there's a mum and dad, and they're in their late 50s. So they come into adoption quite late on. And their 12-year-old daughter, who's at the start of adolescence and just starting secondary school. So already I'm thinking about the life cycle transitions that are affecting this family. Now, the parents were asking for help and support around their daughter's behaviours as she was showing anger and physical aggression towards them. She's also been saying things to them like, "You're not my parents, I don't want to live here." Now, taking a systemic approach places an emphasis on the questions we ask and how we ask them. So, for example, circular questions helps individuals, couples and individuals, to see alternative or new possibilities and to explore other people's views. So when I first met with these parents, I was really curious to understand the interactions between them. So the first few circular questions I asked were, what do you think your daughter's behaviour is trying to say? What do you think her behaviour means? Now, they initially talked about her being difficult and that it felt like she was punishing them. And then I asked, who is most affected by this behaviour? And they both agreed that mum was more affected than dad, which introduced information of a difference. So I asked mum, well, how does her behaviour affect you? What emotions and feelings come up for you? And mum went on to describe having feelings of rejection by her daughter and feelings of failure and shame as a parent. So this was really quite a powerful moment, actually, where she had made this connection between her daughter's behaviour and these painful emotions being triggered for her. And I could see that it was possibly something that she hadn't thought of before, and maybe it would bring about a shift in her thinking. But it had helped me to see that in that difficult moment with her daughter, she became defensive and responded to her by saying, "If you don't want to live here, you don't have to," which then led to an escalation of behaviours by her daughter, hitting out and parents shouting at her. Now, both mum and dad regretted how they responded, and I decided to reframe the daughter's behaviour to the couple by saying, what if the anger gives your daughter power and control that helps her feel safe? That basically right in that moment, she didn't feel in control of her life, that this was her way of getting more autonomy. And I could see that this had an impact on the couple when I said this, and it led to us talking about how attachment, her pre-placement experiences, adolescence, and fetal alcohol could all be impacting on their daughter. I also reflected back to the couple some really lovely, nurturing aspects of their parenting that I was hearing from them. And when this was said, I could see that they responded positively to this. So I knew that it was important for them to hear this. And through the course of this session, I also asked about school, which I'd heard was a source of support and stress. And I picked up that the couple have had quite authoritarian upbringings, and this was influencing their parenting, as I could hear that their rules and boundaries were quite rigid. They've also become isolated from their extended family, as they don't want family members to know about the difficulties they're experiencing. And I picked up on the fact that their daughter has a different cultural background to them, and her birth parents have recently moved into the area, which is a real worry for them. So on the next slide, you can see that there are multiple layers going on here for this family. And by taking a systemic approach, I've opened up the possibilities of considering wider influences, risk factors, and vulnerabilities. So if I focused solely on the parenting, I would have missed out on some really valuable and important information from the school, from the community, and the cultural context. The circular questions I used, they helped me to get beyond the facts of what happened and who said what. It explored the meanings of behaviours and the significance for them, which brought about a better understanding of what was potentially going on. It also helped me to zoom in on the pattern of interactions between the parents and their daughter, which really helped to separate the behaviours from the family members. So that idea of like the pattern is a problem and not the child or the parents, I found this really helpful. So my next slide shows feedback from this couple. After the first meeting, I asked the parents, what has it been like working with me? So they said, the conversations you have with us help us to think about all the different things that are potentially affecting our daughter and ourselves. We feel that you understand us and believe us. On my next slide, I have another case example, just very briefly, of a birth mother who I'm currently working with. Now, she used to have twice a year contact with her son, who is adopted. However, the contact ceased recently because of concerns around substance use on her part and how this affected her during contact. This mother is really struggling to comprehend the loss of the contact she has with her son and has been feeling really hopeless. But when I connected to her preferred view of self and her hopes and intentions, I have been able to have conversations with her that have become a foundation for her being able to take responsibility for her actions. And she has opened up at great length about the plans she has and how important it is for her that her son will see her recover and build a better life for herself in the future. So I've asked her questions about the small steps she can take that will help her to achieve her dreams of a better life, and who are the people that will support her in that process. And before this course, I would never have asked these questions or had conversations like these. And this mother recently said to me, I feel I can talk to you. You asked me about the hopes and dreams I have for myself and my son. No one seemed interested in this before. So working with birth relatives, adoptees, and adoptive parents over the years, they have shown me that even when the legal connections are severed between children and birth family, the emotional connections still remain. And even if family do not see each other, they still think about each other. They're connected genetically. They're in each other's thoughts and memories, their consciousness and their unconsciousness. So just some final thoughts on my next slide. Working systemically is a really respectful way of working. It values service users' experience. There's an emphasis on strengths and resilience and connecting to a person's preferred view of self. It has absolutely transformed the way I work. And while I still experience feeling at times stuck or parents disengaging, it happens much less so than before. I now feel I have a really good set of skills and techniques to help and support the families and individuals that I encounter. So on my last slide, I came across this quote recently by Helen Bonnick, which I feel just resonates with this idea of blame and complexity that I was talking about earlier. By refusing to apportion blame is to acknowledge there are more complicated and complex histories, more complicated and complex environments, more complicated and complex dynamics and relationships than first might be the case.